Do you or a loved one suffer from shiny object syndrome? If so, stay tuned for this episode. We shall talk about it. What's up, friends? Welcome to The Beautiful Mess, where we talk about tools and tactics to improve your life. I'm your host, Paul Didis, a content creator, YouTuber, podcaster, and today I'm super excited because I was inspired by Apple, the good and only Apple, who has wonderful iPhones, MacBooks, Apple Watch, AirPods. More than likely, either you or a friend of yours owns an Apple product. So I thought that this was a great time to talk about shiny object syndrome. Before we go any further, I just want to ask you to please rate, review, and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube especially. Would love to have you in the YouTube fam. Okay, now back to your regular scheduled content. I'm actually looking to buy a new computer. I've loved my 2015 MacBook Pro, but there are times when it just can't keep up with the projects that I'm throwing at it. So at this point, I'm looking to upgrade, and Apple just released today their new MacBook Pros, supercharged, as they say, by the M2 Pro and M2 Max. By the way, if you already have a great working system, I wouldn't run out and necessarily buy this unless you feel like there's a need. As a minimalist, I like to be very conscientious about my purchases, and this is one of those cases because it's very expensive to buy a new computer, obviously. But if you are working in the creative field, or if you have a need for speed or high performance, then that might be something to consider if you're using an older machine and need the extra performance that these computers provide. I'm not seeing any huge upgrades. The HDMI port is a decent upgrade. You can now, I think before it might have supported up to 60 hertz. Now, I think for 4K, it also supports 8K, but for 4K, I think it was up to 240 hertz. So much better refresh rate on the new displays. We didn't see an upgrade as far as the nanometer, the chip. It's still a 5 nanometer. The 3 nanometers, I think, are rumored to come out in the next year or two. So if that's something that you're looking for, I'm guessing with the M3, you'll see something like that. But if you're looking for a computer now, I mean, these are some great options. The Mac Mini was just also upgraded. And so if you need something with a lot of performance packed into a small device at a decent price, I would definitely check out the Mac Mini. But yeah, that was the reason why today we're going to be talking about shiny object syndrome, because it is so easy as a lover of tech, entrepreneur, and just someone that is fascinated by things that are up and coming. I will tell you, one of my, there's a test that you can take. I'm trying to remember the name of it. But basically they give you like your 5 strength, strength quest, I think it is called, Strengths Finder. I think it's a book by Tom Rath, Gallup polls, Clifton Strengths. The Clifton Strengths Online Talent Assessment. If you haven't taken it, I encourage you to do so. It's a kind of it gives you some ideas to lean into those things that you might already know, like you love these things, but it kind of reaffirms it by showing you like, oh, these are the things that you should be looking into. So one of my strengths is I'm futuristic. And so I love the latest and greatest technology. Speaking of which, I'm sure you've heard of AI. And today I decided to actually incorporate AI into this podcast. So I'm using 2 different AIs for it. Maybe I should think to use the cover for my thumbnail. Maybe I'll try to use some AI. I don't know. But at least for my outline, I got that from... I decided I was going to see what the Chat GPT would output if I asked it for an outline for a podcast on shiny object syndrome. And it did not disappoint. I'm telling you, I'm like, wow, it gave me 5 great things to start talking about shiny object syndrome. Will I follow it exactly? Probably not, but at least I've got something to go on. And then here's the kicker. I asked Notion AI for a YouTube description on shiny object syndrome. And let me share what Notion AI gave me for what is shiny object syndrome. So, just in case you're wondering, shiny object syndrome is a tendency to chase after the latest and greatest trends without fully understanding the implications. This often leads to over-investment in new ideas that lack any kind of long-term strategic value. As a result, it can be difficult to focus on the tasks and the projects that are truly important to your business. In this video, we'll discuss the causes and symptoms of shiny object syndrome, as well as strategies for avoiding it. We'll also look at some examples of how businesses have been able to stay focused and make progress despite the distractions of the latest trends. By the end, you'll be equipped with the skills and knowledge to stay on track and make sure your business is reaching its goals. So, that, my friends, according to Notion AI, is shiny object syndrome. That's not bad. I must say, it's pretty convincing, and it's just crazy how you can just give it a little prompt. Hey, I want a YouTube description, about this. Boom, it gives it to me. So I'm going to move on because now we've defined shiny object syndrome and its effects. Oh, I guess let's talk about the effects. So I don't know about you, but one of my biggest things, I love productivity tools, but it can be a rabbit hole that I can just go down and down and down into. And you end up spending more time looking for the tool to do like your best work than actually doing the work. So that is definitely an impact on productivity, ironically, is when you spend too much time looking at the perfect tool. So I've definitely done that. And so that's a good example of a shiny object, is trying to find the perfect tool to do something, or trying to find the best method to do something instead of actually getting that thing done. And then that can impact like getting your goals done. So moving on to number 2, causes of shiny object syndrome. And we're going to discuss, social media advertising and the constant access to information and new ideas. So I guess it's a blessing and a curse. We have access to information 24/7 whenever you want. Whereas in the past, you would typically receive information at this rate of whatever technology was there. So if it was the trains, you'd probably receive it once the new locomotive would come in. Obviously, once technology improved, we were able to connect various cities through things like the telegraph and other methods of modern communication. However, was that actually beneficial? Because all of a sudden now we learned about news that was not important to your local, your local situation. And actually, if you're interested in reading more about this, I highly recommend reading the book Amusing Ourselves to Death. I'll try to remember to put a note in the description if that's something that you're interested in. And in fact, if you're looking for books to read in 2023, I will leave a link to my book list. So last year I read 40 books. And so I have a list of kind of like the top 12 books that I read in 2023. So if you're wanting to check that out, be sure to check that out in the description. And so basically it talks about how the medium impacts the message and the message impacts the medium. So it kind of goes hand in hand, but honestly, the medium has such an important role in dictating what the message is. For example, Reels, Instagram Reels. That dictates what kind of things are shown in a reel, because it's very much geared towards fun, upbeat dances or comedies, like short skits, things that you can digest in like a really quick way. Is it good for your overall health? I don't think so. I think it's kind of like the analogy of like you've got your cotton candy and you got your T-bone steak. Would you rather diet on cotton candy purely or mix in that T-bone steak? I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily to have a little bit cotton candy here and there, but a diet completely on cotton candy, I think, it's kind of that E to E ratio that we've talked about in the past, is that you want to make sure that your education and entertainment ratios are at a good level. You don't want to have way too much entertainment and very little education, because then otherwise, one, you're not probably growing as a person, because to be a good human, I feel like it's important to always be learning and growing and finding ways to improve yourself. So I think it's just because of our modern culture and the amount of advertisements that we're given, we're naturally inclined to want to check out the newest and latest thing. And it also goes back to ancient times. We had this need to know about the shiny objects, because that shiny objects either A, could provide us food, or B, it could be our death, because there is a tiger lurking behind the rock. And so it's important to realize that shiny object syndrome is baked into our DNA. We want to know what that new thing is to either be able to overcome it, to learn from it and develop as a person, or 3, take pleasure from whatever that shiny object is. So it might be a computer. It's like Apple's new release. It's like, oh, that's a shiny object. That's really cool. Or a chat AI, or all of these new AI. And I feel like at some point I want to do a whole episode on artificial intelligence, because it is such a big topic right now. I don't know if, I've got mixed feelings about it. Let's just put it that way, because I think creativity can use AI, but at the same time, will it kill creativity? Because then all of a sudden you're feeding the algorithm with content that eventually it will be like you're creating more and more algorithmic content based on the algorithm. So it's like kind of a self-perpetuating circumstance. So I think, advertising, obviously, so some signs of shiny objects is like, if you're like always looking for new projects to do, if like you like put aside the old ones and you're just like, even though they were good ideas at the time, like all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, this is a great idea. This is a new idea. It's all of a sudden like, hey, I think this will be much better. And sometimes it is. And sometimes it's good to take advantage of shiny objects. But at the same time, don't think of it as the cure all, because then all of a sudden, if you're living a life of all shiny objects, then you can't really enjoy what you have, because you're always looking for something new. So I think there's a good balance between looking for new things and then keeping up with the old. Another big thing about shiny object syndrome is difficulty focusing, because you have FOMO, your fear of missing out. You want that new and latest thing. You might be feeling overwhelmed because there's so many options out there. And if you don't understand all the different things about AI, if you don't understand all the things about technology, then you're going to be falling behind. But I think there's actually a good element of understanding that you are finite. You're not going to be able to understand the entirety of what's out there. And it's okay. We are not capable of just binging all of the content on YouTube, for example. Like, that's not going to happen, nor would it be healthy. I'm telling you, one of the things that I'm trying to debate between is listening to things at 2 times speed, because then all of a sudden I become almost like a machine. I'm just like taking in all this information. Yes, I get it 2 times faster, but am I treating myself well by doing that? I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, like when I'm constantly like consuming content at 2 times speed, I don't know if I'm like, I feel like it's a healthy habit. For a couple things, fine. But if you're consuming a ton of content at 2 times speed, it's a lot to take in. So now let's talk about some strategies that you can apply to overcome shiny object syndrome. So I would set clear goals and create a plan of action for your projects and limit your exposure to distractions. So don't allow yourself to have constant access to your phone, for example. Make sure that you have time when you can set it aside. And we talked about this in the One Thing book. I'll make a note of that book too, the One Thing. And in the One Thing, it talks about the importance of having time in the morning, if you can, where you set aside about 4 hours where you can focus on your one thing, your most important task. What is that one thing that such that by doing it, everything else will be unnecessary or easier? And so that's an important thing to realize, is that maybe you're going about it like it doesn't matter if you're using the shiniest object if you're living a full and meaningful life. Like, a shiny object isn't going to make your life necessarily better. It's crazy to think that. It's like, it's not going to solve all of your problems, because life is not just about technology. Because when I think about shiny objects, I honestly think a lot about technology, and perhaps like different ways of doing things, of accomplishing goals. Maybe it's faster, maybe it's sleeker, but in the end, to live a wholesome, meaningful life, I don't think it's necessary. I think there's other ways of living a meaningful life. So those are some of the recommendations: is creating a plan and sticking to it, and only adjusting as you need to, or as you see fit. Maybe you hit a roadblock and you need a shiny object to get past it. But instead of like constantly just being on like the lookout, unless it's your job, for in one field to look for shiny objects to write on it, or, be the one person to give news about it. I think that's another circumstance that could have that. So, in summary, I think it's important to recognize when you're kind of spiraling into a shiny object syndrome habit, where you're just spinning your wheels looking for the perfect way to do something. Because I honestly believe that it's much better to make progress than to stay in one place and just like be looking for the perfect way to do something, or wait for the optimal circumstances, because it's likely never going to happen. If I wait until I'm a perfect presenter, this podcast would probably never happen. So I think that if you can be aware of it, then you're better off addressing shiny object syndrome, because awareness is the first step of all of these. Is recognizing that there's an issue to begin with, and that will help you be more productive and achieve long-term success, because you're no longer looking for that short-term gain. Maybe it gives you, for example, with the new MacBook Pros, if you had one of the previous ones, maybe you'll see like a 20% increase, 30% increase in the performance of the computer. But besides that, it's pretty much the same machine, slightly better HDMI port. Maybe it has new connectivity for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And then also small changes. It's not like earth shattering, like where it's like, oh, if I get this new computer, all of a sudden, like it opens up the world of this or that. And not necessarily. It could be just another shiny object that you're chasing, that you're going to pour resources and energy into, that might not yield the results that you're hoping for. That'll bring you true and lasting happiness. Because often, whenever you get that one thing that you thought was going to bring you true happiness, there's always something shinier. There's always something bigger, better. So I think it's important to enjoy the process of living life, and to find things that bring you meaning and joy, your family, your faith, the things that last, not something that's, here today, gone tomorrow. So yeah, that's my reflection today on shiny object syndrome. Yeah. Let me know in the comments if you have shiny object syndrome, and what's that shiny object for you today. For me today, it'll be the MacBook Pros, looking at upgrading my setup. But I've definitely experienced shiny object syndrome in one fashion or another, and I'm sure you have, or of someone that has. because it's real. So with that, I encourage you to rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. We'd love to have you in the Messy fam. Be sure to subscribe also. And until next time, my friends, don't go after the shiny object. Stay focused on what's truly important and stay messy.